All right, this is not going to be nearly as exciting as mass spectrometry I can be, but I will do my best. So, a lot of what you heard Greg talk about this morning and what the PATC does, I guess we probably think of it all together as outreach, and that could be anything from a workshop to simply giving one talk at somebody else's food safety symposia. And what I'm going to do is talk about some of that and some of the highlights of doing that. You saw this before, and this gives you an indication of where we've been in the past. 2012 was a pretty busy year. In a minute, I'm going to show you where we're going next. And the theme I wanted to carry through just for these next few slides is the fact that what we're doing is collaborative for the most part. When we go to one of those places in the world, we don't show up with our PATC suitcases. There's sometimes more than a year of setup where Nancy starts making connections to either people we've worked with in the past or reaching out to brand new connections, which was certainly the case in China, and I'll give that as an example here in a minute. The only reason I wanted to show you this is this highlights 2013 and 2014, and then I'll put this on a timeline at the end. And so you've got the flavor of the co-sponsors there in terms of the collaborative nature. Primary sponsors are a lot of time an equivalent body, say in Europe, so an ILSI regional area. We worked with ILSI Japan in the past. ILSI Argentina is a strong collaborator. And again, I'll put this on a timeline for you in a minute. And so you saw this before, and this is the first one here being the Beijing, China workshop. I'll use that as an example of a success where not only are we doing it collaboratively, but we're doing it in a place that the PATC's never operated before. Lots of new things for them to learn from us and us from them. And so obviously it wasn't even one collaborator. We've had, would you say, Nancy, the most input from the Center for Food Safety Risk Assessment? And so I'll use that as an example again. Brazil, just here recently, and then the connection through China is the fact that we were first there in 2011. I'll talk again a little bit more about that. And again, you heard from Greg about the last two. And so the things that are coming up for us soon, again, we just have one talk, which is sometimes the case. Greg will be in Granada, Spain. It's a food allergy session, part of a larger international congress of nutrition. So sometimes there'll be outreach back to us, can the PATC support, in this case, one session, one talk, again, focused on our area of expertise. Probably a similar situation, this has just been settled that Dr. Ronald Van Ree will represent the PATC in this case, so give one talk in Hyderabad, India. And we've been working really hard, probably for at least a year, in thinking about how to do a food safety workshop in South Africa. We do have some connections there, and again, we're leaning on Ronald with his connections throughout Africa, really, to think about how we could do this. Most recently, we thought we could do this in South Africa in 2013. That's likely can't happen just because of timing now. So we're still working towards that because that would be new for us. We haven't worked in South Africa before. We don't quite understand how they operate in terms of bringing in guidance, regulatory guidance from the rest of the world, so that'd be new for us to learn. And so we'll continue to be global, and so all I've done is taken the same map and shown you what was on the table here. So we'll be at 7 sites this year and early next, and you see 2014 down there. For South Africa, it may be somewhere else though. And then, like I mentioned, the ongoing collaborative network, and so we're taking advantage of ILSI Argentina networking and relationship, which is really strong. And so I've just highlighted that there in the sense that we'll continue to operate there. We were there in 2006 also. So building on the past success, this is where I'll use the Beijing, China workshop. We were in Beijing both times. And so in 2011, we provided an allergy-focused symposium. I'll actually show you just briefly the agenda for that because I think it contrasts pretty nicely with what we just did in April there. And so, our audience didn't really cover all the regulatory departments. If attendance was the only gauge, we had less than 100 there. But in April, we asked, would you like us to come back? And so not only is it collaborative, but they wanted us to come back, which we really liked. The ILSI board likes to hear that kind of feedback, so we got a really positive response from the ILSI board recently on that. And so we had a much more inclusive audience. We had Ministry of Agriculture there, which is important. And the first day we had a pretty measurable, we think we had right at 180 people, so that was fantastic. We had this huge auditorium. And so, and then we had something that was interesting, and that was where some of us, if you're available, toured part of their China FDA animal facility. And it's FDA, but I think it was CDC. Was it CDC? It was FDA. Okay, that's what you fixed. So that was pretty interesting. So they've got animal facilities to do a lot of studies. They're highly focused on getting the credentials to run studies effectively as a CRO with GLP accreditation. So that was interesting to see. So real quick, I want to show you the contrast between 2011 and what we did. Again, we went there kind of under the normal guise that PHCC goes, and that is to focus on allergies. So agenda items were basic food safety assessment of GM crops. We give those kind of talks often. Serum screening, IgE binding studies, if you had to do them, how would you do them? New methods to assess protein allergenicity, and discuss some of the past work that PHCC has done in thinking about animal studies, in this case animal toxicology studies on whole foods, so touching on something not allergy related. And so, when we do this, the only reason I left the Q&A highlight is just to let you not forget that we always design these talks that allow generous discussion times. You have language translation, and when you go to these other places, they have really nice facilities when we went there, and we had continuous translation and headsets, and it actually worked out quite well. When we went back this year, the objectives were, describe the state of the science in assessing protein allergenicity, toxicity, and composition analysis. So what they wanted was a much expanded symposia relative to what we did in 2011. They really wanted to see the whole meal deal, and they wanted to hear about clinical allergy, not so much the technical aspects, which are what we normally present. Identify and discuss accepted standards as well as innovative approaches being utilized to address clinical allergy, and discuss the safety framework for genetically modified crops, the approval process, and how they're implemented globally. As you can imagine, they pay a lot of attention to the rest of the world in that sense. And so, not to read this, but just to contrast that this is the truncated version just to show you the topics of what we presented. And so this was an almost 2 full day presentation. We had a nice mix of Chinese presenters. In fact, one of the last talks there, safety assessment in China, regulatory perspective, we got to hear some of the things they're interested in. In one talk in particular, you could see how highly interested they are in doing the work that they do in a GLP fashion. So quality in that sense, matters a great deal. So again, I could leave this up for a second if anybody had any questions, but I really just wanted to, if anybody ever wanted to look at this, later offline, you could do so just to kind of compare and contrast. And like I mentioned, just to give you a feel for how we plan kind of our world on an annual basis, 2013 and 2012 were pretty busy. I've started here with 2013 to show you what's going on, starting with what we just did in, or leaving you with what we did in China, but also what we're doing today, which we consider outreach because we're facilitating, information that either is represented by studies that PATC represents, or just information that we want to put out there for everybody in the room. So we have a block then that kind of will be planned for 2015 onward and late 2014. So the way we operate is we start to get our ideas together about 18 months in advance. Sometimes it takes that long to put on a day-and-a-half workshop. And as we progress, that's where we would start to fill this in. So the way it usually works out is, in some years we've actually had 2 big workshops in a year, but it's usually one. And And then some of the smaller outreach where we're sending 1 or 2 people to represent in a larger food safety workshop can happen 2 to 3 times a year. It just depends. And so that's what I'll leave you with. And just some key aspects that aren't our mission statements reimagined. It's just I wanted to let you know that the way we kind of feel about the outreach is it really builds the relationship. So it's collaborative. We're going back to places multiple times because they know that we keep in contact with the world, keeps all those involved in touch with the ever-changing regulatory environment, and really provides a conduit for communicating allergy science and safety on a global scale. So that's what I'll leave you with, and thank you for your attention.